House Atreides stands as one of the most iconic and morally complex families in Frank Herbert's Dune. Rooted in ancient traditions of honor, loyalty, and justice, the Atreides are often depicted as a force of integrity in a galaxy dominated by deceit, power struggles, and exploitation, symbolizing a more profound philosophical stance on leadership, ethics, and the weight of legacy. What sets House Atreides apart is their commitment to a code of conduct that values compassion and fairness even in the face of ruthless political gamesmanship. This adherence to moral principles makes them both admirable and tragically vulnerable in the deadly arena of the Imperium, where power is often defined by cunning, deception, and brutal force. Throughout the events of Dune, House Atreides becomes a central pillar of the narrative, not just because of its downfall and resurgence, but because it embodies the delicate balance between power and morality. From Duke Leto's unwavering commitment to justice to Paul Atreides' tragic transformation into a messianic figure, the Atreides story explores the cost of leadership in a galaxy where betrayal and manipulation reign supreme. At times, Leto even strives to perfect himself, proving that he stands outside the vast traditions that fill the galaxy with rank and poverty. The House's fate reveals a profound tension. Can one truly lead with integrity in a corrupt system, or must moral compromise be inevitable? The roots of House Atreides trace back to ancient mythological traditions, particularly the Greek House of Atreides from Earth's history. The myth of Agamemnon and Menelaus, both tragic figures entangled in cycles of revenge and destiny, serves as a powerful thematic foundation for Herbert's interpretation of the Atreides. The Atreides family's legacy mirrors the Greek tragedy in profound ways, with noble intentions often leading to downfall and suffering. In the mythological House of Atreides, betrayal, familial conflict, and divine curses plagued generations, reflecting the moral complexity of power and leadership. Frank Herbert, drawing inspiration from these ancient tales, crafts a narrative where the Atreides' sense of duty and moral uprightness often places them in direct conflict with the ruthless realities of their universe. The fictional House Atreides emerged from humanity's ancient past, surviving the trials of the Butlerian Jihad and the long diaspora following the fall of the Old Empire. They became renowned for their resilience, wisdom, and a reputation for moral leadership. This survival was not accidental, but forged through strategic alliances, cultural adaptability, and a focus on sustainable leadership. Duke Leto Atreides, the pinnacle of this lineage, embodies the fusion of ancient wisdom and pragmatic leadership. His values are deeply connected to this historical foundation, emphasizing not just personal honor, but the welfare of those under his protection. Leto's governance on Caladan highlights the importance of balance, respect for the land, protection of his people, and refusal to rule through fear. However, the Atreides' noble heritage also makes them vulnerable. Their open approach to governance, marked by transparency and fairness, contrasts sharply with the cutthroat methods of their rivals, particularly House Harkonnen. Where the Atreides value trust and honor, the Harkonnens embrace deceit and cruelty, creating a philosophical opposition that Herbert uses to explore the moral dilemmas of leadership. This clash of ideals sets the stage for the tragic fall of House Atreides on Arrakis, echoing the ancient Greek tragedies where moral virtue could not prevent downfall when faced with overwhelming external corruption and deceit. The downfall of Duke Leto is not simply a personal tragedy, but a commentary on the fragility of virtue in a corrupt system. It raises a powerful question. Can honor survive in a universe built on power and control? The governance of Caladan under House Atreides offers a striking example of ethical leadership within a galactic feudal system, defined by exploitation and control. Caladan, a lush, water-rich world, stands in stark contrast to the harsh desert planet of Arrakis. The way House Atreides ruled Caladan for generations reflects their core values: balance, sustainability, and the ethical treatment of their subjects. Duke Leto Atreides managed Caladan with a philosophy centered on mutual respect and cooperative leadership. Unlike the oppressive economic models used by other great houses such as the Harkonnens, Leto emphasized stability through loyalty, ensuring his subjects' well-being rather than exploiting them for personal gain. This governance was not purely benevolent. it was a strategic choice. Leto understood that true power came not from fear, but from the voluntary allegiance of his people, creating a bond of trust rather than submission. The Atreides' stewardship extended beyond political strategy. Caladan's wealth came from its self-sufficiency, with a focus on agriculture, fisheries, and sustainable practices. This respect for the planet and its natural cycles was more than an economic model. It was a reflection of Atreides' values. The land was not a resource to be stripped, but a living system to be nurtured, aligning with Duke Leto's philosophy that leadership involved both the care of people and the environment. However, this compassionate style of governance made House Atreides a target. Within the Imperium, where power was often measured in displays of dominance and fear, Leto's values were seen as a vulnerability. His refusal to adopt brutal tactics weakened his political position among the other great houses, creating an imbalance where ideological strength clashed with pragmatic power. The power of the great house of the Caladan was reached in this combatance, largely by the High Priestess's personal power. This dichotomy became tragically clear when House Atreides was ordered to take control of Arrakis, a world where the same compassionate governance proved far more difficult to sustain. The realities of Arrakis, harsh climate, limited resources, and the immense strategic value of the spice revealed the limits of idealism in the face of harsh political realities. The philosophical divide between House Atreides and other great houses, particularly the Harkonnens and Corrinos, defines much of the conflict within Dune. House Atreides represents a model of leadership built on justice and moral integrity, while houses like the Harkonnens and Corrinos embody corruption, exploitation, and control through fear. House Harkonnen, the Atreides' primary rival, represents the antithesis of Atreides' values. Where the Atreides prize loyalty and fairness, the Harkonnens thrive on oppression and brutality. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen's reign over Giedi Prime is defined by excess, cruelty, and the complete subjugation of his subjects. His methods, public executions, psychological torment, and the ruthless exploitation of Arrakis, stand in direct opposition to Leto's humane rule. This rivalry between the two houses transcends personal conflict. It becomes a philosophical clash between two models of power. The Harkonnens operate from a philosophy of fear and dominance, believing that control is most effective when populations are kept in a state of perpetual terror. In contrast, the Atreides model, grounded in mutual respect and trust, seeks to inspire loyalty without coercion. Finally, however, we circle back to the Harkonnens, and the plot fosters, seeking to inspire loyalty without coercion. The Corrino dynasty, led by Emperor Shaddam IV, presents yet another form of power, a monarchy sustained by paranoia and military strength. Shaddam IV's reliance on the Sardaukar, an elite force bred for absolute loyalty and ruthless efficiency, underscores a model of power reliant on overwhelming force rather than moral leadership. The Corrinos' fear of losing their throne ultimately drives their complicity in the plot against House Atreides, illustrating how absolute power often fears moral strength as a destabilizing force. Yet the fall of House Atreides reveals a critical flaw in both their philosophy and the galaxy's political structure. While the Atreides' honor makes them admirable, it leaves them unprepared for the brutal realities of the Imperium's power plays. Leto's moral high ground is insufficient protection against the combined treachery of the Emperor, the Sardaukar, and the Harkonnens, who ultimately conspire to destroy House Atreides on Arrakis. This conflict forces a critical reflection. Can a house built on principles of justice and compassion survive in a galaxy where power is defined by violence and manipulation? Or does true leadership require the very compromises that House Atreides refused to make? Duke Leto Atreides is often portrayed as the ideal noble leader, a man who balances wisdom, compassion, and strategic acumen. His leadership style reflects the core values of House Atreides: honor, integrity, and a profound sense of duty towards his people. Yet, it is precisely these virtues that contribute to his downfall, highlighting the tragic tension between morality and survival in the cutthroat world of the Imperium. Leto's governance of Caladan is defined by his sense of responsibility toward both his subjects and the land itself. He believes that leadership should be based on mutual respect rather than fear. His ability to inspire genuine loyalty among his people is a direct result of his fairness and his visible dedication to their welfare. Figures like Duncan Idaho, Gurney Halleck, and Thufir Hawat stand as testaments to the personal loyalty he inspires, not through manipulation but by leading with personal example. Readiness. His approach to leadership emphasizes collaboration and personal involvement. Unlike other noble rulers who delegate governance entirely to advisors, Leto is deeply involved in the daily affairs of his people, often seen as a figure of both strength and compassion. His ability to unite diverse groups under his banner, such as the Fremen on Arrakis, further reflects his belief in the power of alliances built on mutual trust rather than coercion. However, Leto's adherence to honor also blinds him to the realities of the Imperium's brutal power dynamics. When the Emperor orders him to relocate to Arrakis, Leto suspects a trap but still complies, believing his moral leadership and alliances will protect his family from betrayal. His sense of duty, while admirable, proves insufficient in a galaxy governed by deceit and ambition. Leto's tragic flaw lies in his belief that moral leadership can exist within a corrupt system. His death at the hands of Baron Harkonnen and the Sardaukar demonstrates how integrity alone cannot shield one from ruthless power plays. Yet, his sacrifice plants the seeds for his son Paul's transformation and the eventual retribution against the Harkonnens and the Emperor, making Leto a martyr figure whose values echo throughout the Atreides legacy. His death becomes symbolic, emphasizing that true leadership is not just about survival, but standing for principles, even at the cost of personal loss. Paul Atreides' character arc represents both the continuation and the deconstruction of House Atreides' values. Raised under the principles of his father, Paul is trained to embody the ideals of honor, leadership, and compassion. Yet as the events of Dune unfold, Paul is forced to confront the harsh reality that these values, while noble, may not be sufficient to ensure survival in a galaxy where power is determined by force, myth, and manipulation. Paul's upbringing on Caladan instills in him the Atreides sense of justice and moral clarity. Under the guidance of his father Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho, he learned strategy, combat, and leadership. However, his education is further complicated by the influence of his mother, Lady Jessica, a Bene Gesserit who trains him in the secretive arts of perception, voice control, and emotional discipline. This dual upbringing, Atreides nobility mixed with Bene Gesserit manipulation, creates a complex foundation for his transformation. Upon arriving on Arrakis, Paul is thrust into a deadly conflict where survival depends not on idealism, but on raw power. His ability to inspire the Fremen comes not just from his moral character, but from the manipulation of prophecy, seeded by the Missionaria Protectiva. While Paul initially resists becoming the Lisan al-Gaib, he eventually embraces the myth, recognizing it as a tool necessary to rally the Fremen against the Harkonnens and the Emperor. Yet, this transformation marks a departure from the traditional Atreides values. Paul begins to blur the lines between leader and conqueror, using fear and messianic faith to consolidate his power. His rise as Muad'Dib transforms the Atreides legacy from a house of noble ideals into a theocratic empire built on violence and religious fervor. Quentin Keller is certainly no military criterion. Quentin Keller is a person so far removed from the substantiation of religion that he is defined by a metaphor and sees violence and religious fervor. Paul's choices become increasingly shaped by his prophetic visions, trapping him in a cycle of predestination where he feels compelled to act according to visions of inevitable futures. His moral struggle grows as he realizes that his power, once rooted in the principles of his father, has become something far more dangerous. His ability to inspire faith transforms into a form of psychological warfare, leveraging messianic belief to unite the Fremen in a campaign of galactic jihad. The tragedy of Paul's journey lies in how the pressures of prophecy and power corrupt the core values he inherited. While his father led through justice and honor, Paul's reliance on myth and prescient power makes him both a revolutionary and a tyrant. His arc challenges the idea that moral purity can endure in the face of absolute power, emphasizing the devastating cost of leadership in a world driven by manipulation and prophecy. Ultimately, Paul's transformation reflects the inevitable erosion of noble ideals when faced with the overwhelming forces of fate and power. His journey raises the question, can true justice survive in a universe where belief can be weaponized? Or is the pursuit of moral leadership inevitably doomed to fail in the face of absolute power? The fall of House Atreides on Arrakis is a profound narrative shift in Dune, marking both a personal tragedy and a political turning point. The betrayal orchestrated by House Harkonnen in alliance with Emperor Shaddam IV exposes the fragility of honor in a universe where power is dictated by deceit and fear. Duke Leto Atreides' acceptance of the transfer to Arrakis was driven by his belief in diplomacy and his hope to transform the desert world through just governance. Yet this transfer was never meant to be an opportunity. It was a calculated move to dismantle House Atreides under the pretense of imperial authority. Shaddam IV, threatened by Leto's growing influence and the loyalty he commanded, allied with the Harkonnens, supplying them with Sardaukar troops under the guise of local mercenaries. This betrayal is devastating not just for the Atreides as a family, but for the philosophical ideals they represent. Leto, despite his strategic mind, underestimated the extent of the conspiracy and placed too much faith in the codes of honor he embodied. His death at the hands of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, delivered after being tortured and betrayed by Dr. Yui, underscores the brutal reality of the Imperium's power dynamics. Yet the fall is not absolute. The legacy of House Atreides endures through Paul and Jessica, whose escape into the desert mirrors a symbolic death and rebirth. Forced to abandon their noble titles and wealth, they seek refuge among the Fremen, a culture shaped by survival and spirituality. This phase transforms House Atreides from a noble house of tradition into something far more radical, a symbol of revolution and resistance. Paul's growth during this exile is critical to the transformation of the family's legacy. The desert, both literal and symbolic, strips away the comforts and illusions of noble life, forcing Paul to confront the brutal realities of survival, leadership, and sacrifice. Jessica, meanwhile, uses her Bene Gesserit training to forge alliances among the Fremen, manipulating their belief in prophecy to secure Paul's rise. This fall serves as a powerful commentary on the limits of idealism in the face of overwhelming systemic corruption. House Atreides, once the beacon of justice and nobility, must evolve into something far more pragmatic to survive. The destruction of Caladan's peace and Leto's death marks the end of one chapter, but the beginning of a new, more dangerous form of power. Paul Atreides' rise as Muad'Dib is not a restoration of his father's legacy, but a profound transformation. The house that once stood for justice and honor becomes something far more complex, a religious empire driven by myth, fear, and prophecy. This rebirth is not a return to Leto's ideals, but a redefinition of power itself. Paul's leadership among the Fremen begins as a necessary adaptation for survival, but evolves into a theocratic revolution. By embracing the prophecy seeded by the Missionaria Protectiva, he transforms the Fremen into a fanatical force of galactic conquest. Yet, this weaponization of faith introduces ethical contradictions that haunt Paul throughout his reign. The use of prophecy and religious authority, though effective, corrupts the very principles Paul was raised to uphold. The Atreides name, once synonymous with justice and rational leadership, becomes intertwined with fanaticism and holy war. The Fremen Jihad, unleashed in Paul's name, spreads across the galaxy, turning House Atreides from a noble house into the center of a brutal religious empire. Paul's internal struggle mirrors this transformation. While he continues to view himself as a reluctant messiah, his actions betray a growing reliance on absolute power. His prescience, while vast, also becomes a prison, limiting his ability to act freely without triggering cataclysmic outcomes. The more he seeks to avoid the jihad he foresees, the more he becomes trapped within it. The rebirth of House Atreides under Paul's rule raises profound philosophical questions. Can a leader maintain moral clarity while wielding absolute power? Is it possible to use myth and fear without becoming consumed by them? Ultimately, Paul's reign suggests that the pursuit of control, even for noble ends, can lead to devastating consequences. This theocratic rebirth reaches its full complexity with the rise of Paul's son Leto II, who transforms House Atreides into an empire of complete authoritarianism under the Golden Path. In doing so, the house's legacy comes full circle, highlighting the tragic irony that a family founded on justice and honor could only survive through absolute control and sacrifice. The story of House Atreides in Dune is one of profound complexity, a narrative woven with honor, tragedy, and transformation. From the noble leadership of Duke Leto Atreides to the radical transformation under Paul and the extreme authoritarianism of Leto II, the evolution of this house mirrors the philosophical tensions at the heart of Frank Herbert's universe. Initially a symbol of integrity and moral leadership, House Atreides stood as a beacon of hope in a galaxy dominated by corruption and tyranny. Duke Leto's commitment to justice and his attempts to govern with fairness revealed the possibility of a compassionate ruler within a brutal political landscape. Yet his downfall demonstrated the limits of idealism when confronted with the harsh realities of power. Paul Atreides' transformation shattered the ideals on which the house was built. While his rise as Muad'Dib began as a continuation of his father's noble legacy, his use of myth, religious manipulation, and violence reshaped House Atreides into a theocratic empire. Paul's reign serves as both a warning and a philosophical exploration. Even the purest intentions can be corrupted when absolute power is wielded. You cannot trust what anyone says. Study the records, look for doubting angels, read House Atreides in the scriptures. Only the purest intentions can be corrupted when absolute power is wielded. The ultimate fate of House Atreides under Leto II, the God Emperor, brings the narrative full circle. His reign sacrifices personal freedom for the survival of humanity, emphasizing the cost of control taken to its extreme. The house's evolution from a moral force to a mechanism of totalitarian control reveals the central question of Dune. Can power ever be wielded without corruption, or does leadership inevitably erode the ideals it was meant to protect? And what skill does contemptuously erode the ideals it was meant to protect? House Atreides' legacy, therefore, is both inspiring and cautionary. It serves as a reflection on the dangers of unchecked authority, the fragility of noble ideals, and the profound impact of leadership on the fate of civilizations. Their story reminds us that true strength lies not only in power, but in the wisdom to recognize its dangers. The spice must flow. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the House Atreides, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment as we continue exploring the rich universe of Dune.